Hello, hello, hello. We're finally live. 5 minutes out.
Hey man,
About average. Not bad.
not too bad.
All right, you ready to dive right into it?
Let's go. I'm ready.
What is up, guys? Thank you for tuning into the Modern Macho. This is your host Juan Carlos, and I'm here with my boy Santi.
Yo, what's up, everyone?
We are two gentlemen documenting our journey. We're embracing the dudes that we are in order to become better men for ourselves and for our village. We're tired of fitting the mold. We're tired of dick measuring contests, and we're tired of pretending to be somebody that we're not. After each episode, we hope that we're able to plant a seed, get you to start a conversation with your circle, challenge your thinking, motivate you to focus on growth, and hopefully bring awareness to the twisted programming that we've been brought up with believing. Today, we are going to be talking a little bit about, well, a lot about, I should say, about Pride Month. I think more specifically, just focusing on homophobia. I think the intention behind today's conversation is really trying to get a better understanding of where it comes from. Um, Hopefully, bring some awareness and clarity to what Pride Month really is about, and also I think acknowledging how I think going back, we're able to see how that influences us and how we look at things moving forward. Because it's just a very, I mean, we'll get into it. It's just very interesting that I know there's a lot of concern about influence, and it's been happening. Santi's kind of mentioned this, and we've talked about that. So I'm really excited to get into the conversation, talk about it from a real place. And before we lose any of y'all, I'm going to be the first one to acknowledge that I have very homophobic perspectives myself that I've had in the past that really, I don't want to say blurred because it wasn't anything that I could necessarily judge, but I think it changed the way that I would see things and how I truly felt about things. And so I know that there are more of us that kind of feel that way. And that's ultimately what these conversations are about. There's a lot of division in the room right now because of what's happening, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. It sucks. And so, and again, I think a lot of us are just kind of going with the flow. And I think we actually have very valid fears within that. And so hopefully we can bring some clarity, like what is it that we're really afraid of? What's that we're really mad about? What is that we're really trying to say? And so
hmm
before we jump into the conversation, how you doing, bro?
Good man. I think likewise. Definitely excited to jump into this conversation, and yeah, especially once again, I feel like it's when it comes to these months, right? That acknowledge, I think all good things, right? There tends to be folks who come out, and maybe it's due to um, these weird fears that they have, that I think oftentimes can are masked maybe by religion, right? Maybe masked by their perception of what's natural, unnatural, or just whatever, whatever rhetorics they grew up around, I think one of the things that you mentioned is the validity of the fears, right? I mean, because I think, yeah, like seeing that folks, sometimes people grow up with different ideals and different, I think, yeah, it is valid to maybe have certain fears. Maybe they're not grounded in like the most correct rhetoric, right? Or maybe there's still more self-awareness to really get to the root of things, but nonetheless, right, I mean, people are saying that they're feeling this way. And so and I think a lot of them, I think you see a lot of that homophobia amongst males, very much like yourself, bro. Like, grew up in those male environments where, yeah, dude, like, you know, it you don't do that shit, right? Like, oh, that's gay. That means don't do it, right?
Yeah.
You're equating a lot of these actions that if they're anything to do with gay, it's wrong, right? And I think for many people as they grow older, like you almost start to lose the attachment of like what gay really means,
Yeah.
but it's just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and so because I feel like I've also met so many people now who still say these words, but then they say like, I have no problem with people choosing to love who they love. Oh no, but yeah, oh, that's gay. Like,
Mm,
and it's like, well,
mm,
you just said two very different things in a very short time.
yeah.
And I'm curious as to why that you don't feel that there's any need to at least self-reflect. You know what I mean? And so, and I think oftentimes people guard themselves by saying, but because I'm a good person, bro. Like, it's because no, like there really is no hate in my heart or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, whatevs, like, and not whatevs, right? I think that's why we want to have the conversation. And also we want to make sure that people do feel comfortable enough to, like, then let's dig deep in this conversation, because I think there's a matter of safety, ironically enough, that men oftentimes feel they don't have. They don't feel like it's safe to
It,
share maybe some of the stuff that's going on.
and it's so interesting, right? Because it's like we're all really looking for the same thing, which is safety to express ourselves, safety to say how we feel, and I think a lot of times it's harder to do that. I also want to say along the lines of what you mentioned is like I want to apologize ahead of time if anything that I say comes off as ignorant, or insensitive or can be triggering. I hope that our community understands that a lot of this isn't necessarily celebrated. It's more so really getting down to holy shit, this is where we were, and I think we've talked about this off air where like that was us in high school, dude. Right?
Yeah.
Everything was gay. Oh, dude, we have to go do this homework assignment. That's so gay, bro. That's
Mm-hmm.
so like it's just so normal, not realizing what we were saying half the time, right? Um,
Right.
and I think to me, I feel like this is such a dope opportunity because even as people are expressing themselves in ways that I think maybe the way they're handling those actions tied to those thoughts, as you mentioned, is not cool. I also see a great opportunity where I'm like, whoa, people are speaking up,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're being rude, even if shit's shit that I'm like, that's not how I speak. But to me, I see that as an opportunity to be like, yo, I appreciate that you're expressing yourself. Let's really talk about this. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's really try to understand each other where instead of trying to shut people down from whatever perspective you might see it, it's like this is an opportunity where we're speaking up, we're saying how we feel, right? And just like our children, where it's like, hey, those thoughts are valid. Now, what are we really saying? Right? What is our understanding? So that when I say, hey, I want to take care of my kids, but that's why I'm going to support a certain beer product. And it's like, well, if we're talking about protecting our kids, how does beer have anything to do with protecting our children? Right. And again,
Yeah.
not taking away from the fact that I'm like, yo, I fuck with you because you want to protect your kids. I want to protect my kids too, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I fuck with that
Yeah.
heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, and I think when you mask it with it's me protecting my kids, no one is going to disagree with wanting to protect your kid.
Yeah.
People just have a different definition of, okay, well, what does protect entail, right? And
Right.
when you start mapping it out, that's where I think that's where you really start seeing a lot of like the 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 trueness to it all, right? Because I think once again, sometimes it goes back to like, well, I nothing against them. I just, whatever. Right? Like, it's
you
not that
know,
I hate them, right? And there's almost this piece of me where it's like, okay, well then just come out and say what you're really feeling, right? Like, um, and I think more than anything, more than it to like actually have a conversation, because for all you know, they come out with whatever they really are feeling, and you still can't have a conversation. But at least there's a little bit of self awareness in that. And you would like to think that if you're a good person and you're self aware about some pieces about yourself that are maybe not 100% sound, that you would work on it. Now, that's just me assuming, right? I
right,
I, I I
right.
can't I can't say that it would be one way or another, but yeah.
Well, and again, and I think that's why. So, and here's one of the things that we also want to share with you guys. So, our idea here is we want to have this conversation with y'all and really just talk about it. Like, let's look back, right? So that we can kind of figure out how that dictates things moving forward.
Yeah.
And we are going to do our next episode with someone that can educate us. I mean, maybe even call us out and be like, yo, even as you're talking about it, y'all are saying some shit that you should like. I'm down for that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just more so like you and I putting ourselves at the forefront of like, you know what? Yeah, this shit is weird. This shit is uncomfortable because the first thing I thought of when you said that was like when someone they make that comment of so I'm not racist, but and what are they about to say?
Probably some racist.
Some
Yeah.
racist ass shit, right?
Yeah.
and like
Mm-hmm.
and I've caught myself. I would catch myself kind of thinking like, yo, I know I love everybody. Like I do, right? Like at the end of the day, like I have love for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but and
Mm-hmm.
just that alone, I know I love everyone, but it's like, okay, so what the fuck? I'm conflicted in the way that I'm trying to see things. And so I bring that up because we don't talk about that enough. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to share just quickly a story about we went to go watch Strange World,
Mm.
which is a Disney movie, right? And it's basically the message was actually pretty fucking dope. But essentially, what the movie was about, and it was interesting because I actually saw it got a lot of backlash from the
Mm.
community, which I also saw why. And at the same time, I was like, dude, for a man like myself that had those tendencies and that perspective, it was very helpful because it really opened my eyes to like, whoa, oh, this is what it's about. Essentially, it's a dad having a tough relationship with his dad, which then ends up trickling down to him now being a father, and then end up having to have a difficult relationship with his kid, right? And so it's about fatherhood, man. It's a really cool movie. But one of the things that does kind of happen in the very beginning of the movie, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, is the young boy ends up meeting with his friends and they're like all hanging out. But then there's like this flirty little tension between the teens. Well,
Mm,
the other teen was another boy. And bro, now mind you, when we went to go watch it, I'm gonna be honest. When we went to go watch it, I was just taking Julian to the movies. I wasn't going in there planning to see that movie. I didn't even know what fucking movie it was. I just knew it was the only Disney movie that they were playing at the time, and I wanted to take him to the movies. So it all worked out for a fucking reason. So I'm watching it, and then I get this little vibe, and I'm like, wait, is the boy flirting with the other boy? Right?
mm,
And then they put this little narrative around it of like, ha, 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 very cute, da, da, da. And like, dude, I just felt this fucking hot flash just go over me, like, and the first thing I did was like look over at Julian, and I almost wanted to cover his eyes
yeah.
because there was this sense of like, whoa, I did we no, you know what I mean? Like, we don't want to look at this. Like, I don't know how I feel about this. Of course, I didn't. I kind of just embraced my little moment of whatever the fuck it is that I was feeling, and we just kind of left it at that. And so I think what was also very interesting about that is that nothing ever came of it. Like it just kind of happened. Like whether my son, I don't know, right? We haven't necessarily got into the depths into those conversations, but it wasn't a change all be all where my son was all of a sudden brainwashed into something that, oh my gosh, was so bad, right?
Hmm.
Um, and there was also something that I think was very interesting from that, which was I think there's also and shout out to my guy Matas because he brought up a good point, which is sometimes this doesn't even have to be homophobia, right? Sometimes it could just be PDA. Because
Right.
I will say that about Julian. Julian, I've noticed like when people are affectionate, he gets
Mm,
very like, "E," like,
mm,
and again, I don't know if he makes that correlation or not. And I think as a father, that's why this is also very important to me because at the end of the day, this stuff is happening.
yeah.
Like, right? It's what the world is going on today. And for me, it's like I want to be as involved as I can because there's a lot of things out of my control. And I think about even just like sex
Mm,
and like, where did you learn about sex? It wasn't my parents,
yeah.
right? The world influenced me and taught me all these things about sex. And
Yeah.
so now I'm like, well, I want to learn about sex so that I can teach my kid about sex, right? And I think for me, that's a big part of why this is important to me is because this scares me. It is definitely weird, uncomfortable. And I want to know more so that there's awareness to it and it becomes normalized. And I'll get into the normalizing a little bit too, because I saw La Misión and there
Yes.
was something that was like, whoa, because yeah, like I guess I think about that awareness that I go, wow, like really educating myself on something that's
Hmm.
gonna happen. And it's like, do I want to educate myself and get uncomfortable and push through that homophobia so that I can learn and then really like help my son out with just having awareness of what's going on in the world for himself. And if he ever needs a safe space, that he knows that I'm here and I actually know what the fuck I'm talking about. Right.
Yeah.
Um, or am I just gonna keep denying it to myself? And then it's like, all right, bro, just tell
Yeah.
yourself it's not happening, but it is.
Yeah. A few things that are coming up. So, because you're right, like, you're more influenced by the world than you are so many times your family, especially growing up. I actually remember the first time I learned about sex. I I remember I was like at a party with my cousins, dude, and we were watching TV, and there was this commercial that came on. I think it was like a Viagra commercial because it was this older couple, like well into their 80s, and they were in the car making out like Titanic style, And I was like, and then but someone said, "Oh, they're having sex," and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" Like I remember literally asking, "What is that?" And it was like, "Oh, it's when like I forgot exactly what it was, but essentially it's like I understood that you have to do this action to make babies." And I remember thinking for the longest time, "Oh, kissing is sex." I thought kissing was
Same.
sex. And so moving forward, I remember seeing so many like movie scenes, and in my brain, I'm like, I'm watching sex, right? And it's just so funny that like so today. right? Because you know what there's like it's been some protests that have kind of
Mhm.
turned kind of physical
Mhm.
over in the Glendale area,
Yep, I saw that.
and
The Pride Month assembly, right?
yes,
Yeah.
and it was so funny. Like I saw this post, and like you know what, fair play in the sense that like you know the mom that they interviewed, like I felt like she didn't do the worst job of seeming very like objective to it, where because I think that's what people were giving them props about. It's like, oh, like they did such a good job of like being open to a discussion, and you know, yes, somewhat. I also feel the person who was interviewing was like you know she was on the younger side, maybe could have been a little bit more challenging if they wanted
Mm.
to. But it was a pretty they were pretty fair questions and they had pretty fair responses. But one of the things the mom talked about was like, well, you know, at school they shouldn't be taught about these different types of love, and they shouldn't be open to the sexualization, yada yada yada, right? To be fair, man, I don't know. Like, I'm not very well educated on like what kind of rhetoric exactly is being talked about during Pride Month. Because if it's just about love, right? Like affection, I don't think that's bad, right? Now, if
No.
they're giving them full on sex education classes, okay, I don't know because like to be fair, there isn't a lot of sex ed at that time, but also like there is a lot of sex education period, whether it's through the school, whether it's through you, or whether it's other social ways of being, right? And so
Yeah.
all that being said, I don't know it all. I don't know exactly how it affects children. My mindset, I'm not even there yet, seeing that I'm not a freaking parent at this point. But it like, you know, but still there is a point where it's like nonetheless, like it does kind of feel like that you just don't want them to see this different type of love because I'm sure like if this kid lives in a fairly traditional household, they're gonna see their mom and dad kiss. Is that
Yeah.
bad? Right? Like, and so like you know, we just didn't really grow up in an environment where being gay was accepted, so you didn't see it, and when you did, it was typically in negative comment or like negative comments were being said about those actions, and so for us, it's like, oh yeah, that's bad or that's normal, unnatural, yada yada, right?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
that being said, you're 100% right in the sense that you know these things are being exposed to our kids, and I'm sure if you went to this movie and it was just this little boy, little girl having a cute little thing, like you probably wouldn't have batted an eye.
Yeah, no, for sure, because it's that's normal to me, right?
Mhm,
And yeah, it's interesting too how I feel like with the little that I've been looking into it, because again, I feel like I'm not super educated on the topic, and that's why I'm really excited to even have someone on now after, and that's part of the reason why I was like, let's talk what we know, right?
mhm,
Like we are not professionals, we make that very clear, but it's like let's talk about it just like the rest of us dudes that are trying to figure it out. This shit's intimidating, and it's hard to talk about, and so it's like fuck it, we'll put ourselves at the forefront of where we're at.
mhm,
I like you said, right? Like I know that this shit can be triggering, and I actually learned something that was very interesting, which was that it's a trauma response.
mm,
It's a trauma response because when I see the two men kissing, now I can't help but think like, oh putos, like they're son jotos, son
mhm,
mandilones. Everything that's been associated with what I've been brought up with believing, and even furthermore, I want to protect my kid from fucking being picked on.
yeah,
Of course I'm gonna
yeah,
be afraid. You're telling me that it triggers a trauma within fucking me, and now on top of that, I'm supposed to support my kid to go through this what I think is gonna be a trauma?
mm,
Fuck that, dude. Get rid of that stuff. I don't wanna look at it because I don't want my son getting anywhere near it. And
mm,
and something that I'm very grateful now to be in a different place in my life where I'm like, yo, okay, these fears are valid. Let's really try to understand what I'm and not maybe not we, but what I'm really trying to say, right? What I really am afraid of and how I can really do something and what I can really control. And what I'm really starting to realize is like this isn't about brainwashing people about different sexualities or about different genders. This is about bringing awareness to the kids that are going through some shit that they don't have enough resources for. And
mhm,
it's awareness for the people that the children that do have the resources to understand, hey, there are individuals that are different than you, right?
right,
Like this isn't a brainwashing ceremony of like, yo, let's because then I think of the other here's the other thing I think about too is like that's a very valid fear. And I don't know how I feel about that. If this was about just fucking trying to have orgies in front of kids, I'm not down with that shit. Like that's kind of
mm,
weird, right? Like,
mhm,
and then I think like how many of us as parents have fucking snuck around while our kids were home and try to get one in?
Yeah.
And why was that ever a concern of like, oh my God, my kid's gonna see sex and hear the moaning at 3, 4, 5 years old? Why was
Hmm.
that like, I heard and saw some shit when I was a kid,
Yeah.
right? And so again, that doesn't mean, oh, it is okay. It is okay that they see these things at that age. But it's like, if we were exposed to some of this stuff, why aren't we protecting kids from that, even if it's straight?
Yeah.
Why is it funny to educate kids or to post a video of a child that is small and we're talking about these things that are supposed to be funny for a child at 4 or 5 years old, but then when it becomes about, hey, mommy and mommy love each other, it's like, oh, why are we throwing this stuff in our kids? And it's like, okay, wait, why aren't we protecting them from all of it? If that's
Yeah.
what it's about. Again, what are we really saying?
Hmm. Hmm. No, yeah. No, yeah, dude. Well, 100%. And once again, I just can't help but think about, like, the I think, to your point, right? Like, why aren't we trying to protect them from everything, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, really fucked up, really sad. But I don't know. You heard about remember the Valdez school shooting that happened in Texas, like
Mhm.
a year or two ago, and it really sad what happened with a lot of these little kids, right? In freaking elementary school. What I thought was interesting, and it's hard for me to, like, because I mean these kids are no longer with us, right? And
Mhm.
so, but
Mhm.
they actually had like a list of like lovebird connections, you know, and it was a big rhetoric in the storytelling, because it was like, freak, that's heart wrenching, dude. Like, man, that's so sad. And then I mean, I probably thought this because it's Texas, and Texas tend to be a little bit more like Christian based in a lot of the things that they do. And so, but I just thought it was interesting that it's like, like, that's a cute way to show, like, that sometimes little kids can have a little like lovebird flings. And I 100% know that wouldn't have been a thing if it was a little boy having a thing with a little boy, or vice versa, a little girl with a little girl.
Mm.
I'm sure that would have been nipped in the bud. I mean, I don't know, and I don't know that. I just couldn't help but have that feeling, and because not when that piece of information came out, like I said, I read the comments, man. Not one person had any problem with it, because I mean, like, I'm not saying, like, but come on, like, you're putting these kids together, right? Someone may could have argued, like, why are you sexualizing my kid that way, to make them in a relationship when they're only like in third, fourth grade? Like, that's kind of weird, don't you think? Like, what is this, a matchmaking school? Like, you see what I'm saying, though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, the response was a lot more like, oh, that's so sad, like, because these are kids and they feel love, dude. Like, that I think that's okay for them to feel. Obviously, like, they're probably not mature enough that there should probably be conversations throughout them having these emotions, and those conversations being with the correct people, with people who are gonna like have love for them and whatnot. It was just kind of one thing that just stood out to me, and it made, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have thought of it that way. And that's just me being super like cynical.
No,
And
because I
everything.
think that you're also bringing up another important point though, bro. And I know it sounds, I could see why you would think that that sounds like it's almost like harsh, right? But I
Mhm.
think that the sad part about all that too, and this is something that I see more and more, is the amount, like, I really see like the importance of us all going to therapy, is because even something simple as grieving, like, death is so normal left and right, that people, it almost feels like there's no moments to slow down and just acknowledge the fact that, yo, we lost lives.
Yeah.
And it quickly turns into, okay, how does this fit my narrative? How does this support my idea? Well, now it was a child. Oh yeah, but now he was white. But now he was brown. Oh no, but
Mhm.
it's because now he supports. It's like, yo, we can't even come together for the simple fact that we lost some individuals right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, that fucking blows my mind, dude. And granted, some people do some ugly ass shit. I get that. I get that. I totally understand. Um, but I don't know. I think that part to me is very, that lack of empathy, I think changes everything when it comes to the dynamic. And I say that because I don't see a lot of consistency in the way that people feel about these things. There's a lot of
Yeah.
flaws in these shifts in perspectives based on personal beliefs. And to your point, it's about the children, but there's another side of like, yo, that instead of promoting hate and for us trying to stop living somebody living their life, we can actually talk to our children. Like our
Hmm.
like if it's that bad, homeschool your kids. And if we can't do that, if you're involved with your children, you would know that like you have influence over your kids too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times why that was difficult for me to understand is because I'm not gonna like get all crazy and be like, "Oh, the streets raised me." But a lot of what we knew was because of what was thrown in our face outside of what our parents did. And I think that to me is also very eye-opening because it's like, damn, y'all really don't think you have it. Like this shows how much we value being parents, that it's difficult for us to understand that, hey, you can talk to your kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
that if you're modeling being a good individual, they will be attracted to that and they will want to be like you. Just like if you decide that you want to be hurtful towards other and be mean and do all those kinds of things, they're going to lean towards that,
Yeah.
right?
No. Yeah.
But you bring up a great point where you look back, it's like, how did we learn a lot of this information before? Nobody ever sat down and talked to us.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was it
dude.
was a lot of stuff thrown in our face. Now I thought about going into La Misión.
Mm.
Um, you know, that was another incident where like, dude, right away when he tells his pops and like, well, pops finds out, right? But like, spoiler alerts again if you haven't seen it, and I recommend you go watch it. But like, dude, it's crazy. Like when he goes into the school for the first time now, and everyone knows. And you know what's crazy is like, fuck, as a dad, I was just like, God damn, I just want to go fucking punch half these motherfuckers in there.
Yeah, I
And I
know.
also, and here's the thing though, I also thought like, you imagine if they would have had fucking conversations with these kids and normalized this when they were younger, it wouldn't have been that
Yeah.
big of a fucking deal that he shows up to school.
Right. No, yeah, 100%. I think also like uh what I really appreciated this movie was like the different look that you had on like a homophobic character, right? Where he wasn't like he presented like any other guy, like in a traditional sense, right?
Yeah,
That and so I think dude, I was older when I watched it, and that's probably one of the first times I saw any sort of media that portrayed a guy just loving on a guy without him having this like feminine way of being, right? And once again, I don't think it's bad for people to be exposed to these different types of folks at a younger age. Once again, yes, we're worried about like what's appropriate age. I'm not going to get into those semantics, but once again, as Carlos and I have discussed, kids are exposed to a lot of shit
that's
their
right.
whole lives. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just kind of like, all right, well,
I
like,
mean, bro, think about the fucking music we were listening to at the age that we were at, bro. And the
dude.
shit it was talking about. Like, I mean, who was I having this conversation with? Can't remember who it was, but it was a Jason Mraz song, bro. Not even like a
Mm,
fucking rap song. It was a Jason Mraz song. And he's talking about how he's like, uh, the song's called Butterfly. And he's like, I'm your pole and all you're wearing is your shoes. And like all this shit, right? That he's basically talking about like having sex with this woman.
hmm.
But again, I'm not saying it was okay for me to listen to that,
Sure.
but at the same time, it's like, why wasn't anybody why wasn't everybody protesting that or going around trying to riot to eliminate this music from like, no, we can't make this accessible. This song
Exactly.
shouldn't be able to be heard, right? And how much efforts are we really putting into this? We're not going to deviate the conversation to this, but like
Right, right, right.
tying it into what we do, like that's when we talked about the cancel culture and we talked about taking cartoons away. And I'm like, I don't know a lot about this work when it comes to masculinity, but I know enough to know that taking that cartoon off the screen isn't actually going to solve anything towards the problem that we have with
Yeah.
masculinity right now and machismo.
Hmm.
If anything, it makes it worse because now we're just trying to like we're trying to we're trying to hide the problem. It's like, no, no, no,
Right.
no, no. Let's bring it to the surface. Let's really talk about it so that we can actually start to create change, you know?
Yeah.
And I had that similar thing with here. And, I fucking really had so much love for the dad. Like when he's fucking making him breakfast, dude, like homie shows up from the fucking party when he finds out, right? But he like shows up from the party, takes off his shoes, like puts the blanket on him, right? Like just so many things that I'm like, bro, as homophobic as we understand that those things weren't good, like this motherfucker loves his kid in the best
Yep.
way he knows how. Like, I had so much love. I had so much empathy for him the whole time, even as he was frustrating me, right? Even after
Right.
there was those times where I'm like, dog, your fucking kid needs you. And man, I told myself I was gonna get emotional, but one of the biggest things that hit me from that, bro, is I couldn't help but think like how grateful I am to be where I'm at now, not having that intensity or much really of that homophobia and that trauma that I carry now, where I'm like, you saw the relationship in the beginning and that quick shift as soon as you saw that picture.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think, like, I'm so glad I'm not where I was a couple years ago, where the relationship that I have with my kid would have been worthless because of his sexuality. I
Hmm.
would have been willing to throw it all away because of that.
Right.
And I just couldn't help but reflect and think, like, dude, I'm grateful for you, for the people within my village that I'm like, I'm so glad that we've been able to challenge each other from a place of love that doesn't dictate
Hmm.
and won't let me fuck up the relationship, that because there's so much more things more important than that,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like, there's not, if it makes sense.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, like in and I think once again, like depending on where you are in terms of how many layers of self-awareness you've been able to peel back, like are you going to allow yourself for that experience to be trauma based, like kind of like you mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
or have you been able to process those homophobic thoughts, experiences, so on and so forth, to the point that you're like, okay, I know what this is, and yeah, there might still be some parts that you have to fight back, right? um I don't think that makes you a bad person,
Yeah.
but anywho, like I think one of the things that stood out to me when I first watched this movie is, first of all, I had no idea watching this movie that it had anything to do with his son being gay. I didn't know, like I didn't know the plot line to it.
Mm.
So I remember someone just said, "Hey, dude, you should watch it. It's pretty dope." And so
You
when
saw Cholos?
I saw Cholos, I saw them like
Some
riding their
low
lowriders
and
and stuff.
slow, baby.
And I'm like, okay, this is pretty dope. Like, I don't know where the fuck it's going.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
thought it
yeah.
was. I honestly thought it was gonna be some like a gangster timeline where someone was gonna get shot up and then a drive by and someone was gonna die and we need to blah, 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 all that stuff.
Blood in, blood out on a
Like,
budget.
exactly, blood in, blood out on the budget, and it ended up not being that whatsoever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so dude, I almost remember being like having the same reactions you were, where you're like, no, don't be that asshole father. Don't, because yeah, he's a total like he turns from your model father that anyone would have wished to have to just a complete piece of shit.
Yeah,
With all
yeah.
that being said, dude, I think I'm on the same boat with you, like where I never lost love for the man. Like I kept rooting for him
Mhm.
over and over and over to to learn, to develop, to be better. Period.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just so funny that like and I ask myself this, and and it's a tough question to ask, but why wouldn't I have that type of love for anyone else if they really are good people?
Mhm.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it's like
Well,
once again, like and because I want that, but I also like because I also feel there's gonna be some people that will probably watch that movie and not feel that way and be like, oh no, they're actually not a good person.
yeah.
They showed it
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
They showed all their cards. And I can't say you're wrong either, because the impact it had was deep,
Yes,
you
and you bring
know?
up a great point, which is projections from both ends of it, right?
Yeah.
Projections on both ends, because I think, even showing hate towards the dad, it's like, well, at some point, where does the self-reflection come in of like, hey, the hate that we're promoting comes from somewhere? And I'm also understanding of the privilege that I have as a straight man, that I haven't had to navigate through a lot of the traumas that some individuals have had to go through. And so that carries something to do with it, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm very well aware of that. And that's why I think it really takes us all as a community coming together, right? And like we said, addressing, hey, this shit scares the fuck out of me with my kids. Like, and what's crazy? I just saw it on the news the other day, and she was one of the board members from LA. And
Mm.
and it was interesting because she even said it. She's like, we're just this, it's a very valid concern to be worried about kids being sexualized. What we want is simply to bring awareness to things that are already happening. And like, it was this fucking weird sense of peace of mind where I was like, okay, I could fuck with that. I
Yeah.
could fuck with that. Like, We're all just trying to fucking get along here. I'm not saying that I'm gonna do it, right? I'm not saying that like I'm gonna change my. Nobody's asking me to change what I like. I'm very
Yeah.
confident in what I like, and even that, right? Like how insecure was I that my pride was affected because I was wearing a different colored shirt than everybody else, or because I was having a fucking pina colada or a fucking margarita because I couldn't handle the taste of beer at the time, right? And
Mm.
how something simple
Mm.
as that like pushes you towards like shit. I should like beer, right? I shouldn't drink seltzers, and again, if you don't like seltzers, don't fucking drink them. If you don't
Yeah.
like sweet drinks, don't drink them. But how much of it is really what it is, and how much of it is influenced by these things that affect us and that kind of like become overpowering. And I think that that kind of ties into something that really stood out to me with the movie, which was how there was two parts that I'm like, I could also see why dad was in this position too, where one, now the dad started understanding how much his kid was being picked on, because at one point even the dad was being picked on, remember? And then
Hmm.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
sprayed
Yeah.
the they tagged up his fucking the door
Right.
of his shop,
Hmm.
right? And so, like, there's that side of it where I'm like, part of that homophobia comes out of fear, just like machismo came from a place of trying to protect our women from being raped. That's why
Yeah.
we became so fucking like manly mans, you know what I mean? And so it's like
Hmm.
it came from it. I don't want to say it was homophobia was brought up for a good reason, but there
Yeah.
was some type of protection that arose from it. Just like when we lash out and we become angry all the damn time, there's this level of protection underneath that, right? That unless
Hmm.
we understand it, we can't redirect it in a better way.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially
Mm.
what I saw is like, damn, this motherfucker's worried. Because remember, I don't know if you remember too, he made a comment about like the shit we were doing back in the day. And
Yeah.
I have homies, bro. I'll tell you right now, I had homies who are like, we used to fuck with those fools, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, okay, so of course you're like whether you believe it or not, you have those thoughts going into the fact that now your son is going to potentially be the one being picked on. And
Right.
that's very valid. And that's very, very valid. And that's
Yeah.
where the value of therapy comes in, because that also needs to be disconnected from the reality of like, yo, don't let that fear stop you from understanding that when your kid decides to talk about these things with you, you can be that safe space for him.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want us as fathers, as men, to miss out on connections. Shit, just as men in general, with our homies, with our brothers, with our kids, over something that we don't actually believe, we just accepted.
Right.
And there was the other pill too, which was the homies he had, because
Hmm.
what I thought was very interesting is they were, there was one or two of the fools that were very like they were all promiscuous and shit. You could just tell like
Yeah.
those
Hmm.
are those motherfuckers, you know.
Uh,
But like I would say 80% of that circle that he had was very supportive. And one thing that stood out to me was I think there was like this pressure from him, I think in his own head of like, fuck, what are my homies gonna think of me?
right. Yeah.
And how that plays into this homophobia of like, because I know I would think about that when I thought about that, like Julian being like maybe one or two. These conversations weren't even happening yet, right? Like you didn't hear about a lot of this pride stuff just yet. I feel like it's really progressed at a faster rate now. I think social media really makes a lot of this stuff accessible, which is both a pro and a con,
Hmm.
right? But I do remember thinking like, well, what if Julian was gay? And dude, honestly, one of my first thoughts was like, well, fuck it. Like I was trying to convince myself that I wouldn't care, but then I was like, fuck, dude, like I guess I failed him as a man. My homies are gonna be like, dude,
Mm.
you failed him. Like you failed him if you're
Mm.
right. Like all these ideas that I had that now I look back and I think like, damn, bro, that sucks, man. Like all this stuff that I was being fed as to what this really meant, that it wasn't about being responsible. Cause then I started questioning too. I'm like, I know that I've met some men that are straight men
Mm.
that I felt were very shitty individuals. But there
Mhm.
wasn't that fear of like, oh no, but they're straight. And it's like, what? That don't make no sense. Like, how
Mhm.
is it that as long as they're straight, it's okay for them to be irresponsible and shitty people, like,
Mhm.
disrespectful. As long as they're straight, then it's cool. And I'm like, nah, that shit ain't right, dude. Something's
Yeah.
off here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And then you know what, like going off of that too, I think one there like I guess a category that like oftentimes pops up when it comes to like talking about why like the LGBTQ rhetoric should not be out there. Like, and I think this is more of an open-ended thing. It really comes down to religion too. How people will hold on to the religion as the reason why it's not right. You know what I mean? Like, I can't fucking tell you how many times on Facebook I said that stupid joke you hear all the time. It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And I'm just like, dude, you like people are still saying the same joke over and
Right,
over and
right, right,
over,
right.
and they
I hadn't
think they're
heard that
the
one.
most fucking like they think they're like whatever. That's just me like venting at this point.
Sure,
But
sure.
like, but I just can't help but feel like, what is it really, bro? What is it really that scares you? Because you're here talking about religion. Like, let's talk about why we have religion in the first place. And that would be the first question I would have for someone, would be like, why do you choose to be religious in the first place? What do you hope to get out of it? Because me, as someone who grew up fairly religious throughout my life, I always knew there was something off when it came to the LGBTQ rhetoric. Like, and that's not to say that I was a social justice warrior, dude. I was a homophobic piece of shit in my own ways as well, right? With
Yeah.
that being said, I always questioned it, and I always felt like, I don't know, it seems a little off
Mhm.
because, like, I mean, I also grew up with a lot of gay. I remember like the first gay person who, like, real gay person I met was in middle school through this girl who I was like having this flirty thing with, and and that's whatever. You actually know him. He was a dancer at Valley View High. And I don't want to
Oh,
throw his
yeah.
name out
No,
there.
no, no, I know exactly what
Yeah.
you're talking. Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
know him, dude. He's good people. Like, since
Great people.
literally since I was in eighth grade, I was like, dude, this guy's so motherfucking cool. And and totally like would flirt with me and stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, I would get kind of uncomfortable, but I also felt like it was in this really safe space that I was able to just navigate through it. And we ended up having a really good friendship, even though it was from afar and whatnot. But I felt like, you know, I had that opportunity to meet other folks, guys in color guard who, like, were all good people, but I also saw them get fucked with. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You also see that part of it, and I think that's, like you say, like that trauma that comes out. Anyways, all that being said, sometimes people then use religion to mask the shitty ways you're treating other people. I'm like, I don't know if I could subscribe to that thought, that you're
Yeah.
gonna talk about Jesus and all the things that he did, and but he would just go out and call these people slurs just because of the people they love.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it just, it's odd to me. It feels like there's some sort of dissonance that you're fighting, and you're masking it by saying, "Well, it's because I'm a true Christian." Like, what
Yeah,
does that
yeah.
even mean? What does that even fucking
Right.
mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? Oh, you got baptized with some fucking water on your forehead? Like, I, even myself, right? Like, I got married to the Catholic Church with Denise. Does that make us fucking hardcore Catholics? We haven't gone to church since, bro.
Right. Right.
What does that say about me? And so I don't know. I just think it's interesting.
I think there's and you talk about the Adam and Steve, and I would like one thing I did want to say about that too is like not to validate it at all, but I also feel that sometimes humor is a great way to bring awareness to some of these conversations, and I've
Yeah.
caught that, especially the more that we've used the platform to put out some memes and just like joke around about like, hey, if your homies catch you at therapy, right?
Therapy.
It's like
That
they're
was
standing
funny.
around, right? Like stuff like that. And so now I think what's very triggering about it, and this is what I think more about along the lines of what you're talking about, which is like it's not about cracking a joke, but it's like it's a very insensitive way to try to justify,
Hmm.
and also it's kind of cheap because it's a very indirect way
Super
of doing it,
cheap.
right? Like instead of just saying, because I see that all the time. I catch that sometimes where people like start posting these memes and they'll post them very indirectly, and it's like, hey man, if that's how you feel, let's have the conversation, right?
Right.
Like let's just call it for what it is. And so, and one of the things that like I've caught on, I think with the religion in my experience is that some people are very passionate about their views and the ways that they see things, and you know what? Good for them, right? Like, I'm who the fuck am I to say how they can and can't believe it? Now, the fact that they feel the need to shit on others, I mean, I don't know if their book really says that they should be doing that, and if it does, that's kind of fucked up. The also, I think the inconsistency that I kind of see there too, which is going back to like, I feel grateful to have the awareness to also understand that it's like there's a big fight about, well, I'm about it. Unfortunately, the book, my book tells me that there's only a man and a woman, so I cannot allow just being loving towards somebody that doesn't agree with those things, or that doesn't see things that way because it's not the way the world is supposed to work. And and what I find very interesting about that is, there's a lot of things that that book says too, which is things like not masturbating, right? Waiting till you're married
Yep.
to fucking have sex. And so my point there is, okay, that's valid. Like if your book is very much about that and that's what's going to make you great, and you're going to be respectful of somebody else and you're going to do things your way. I mean, at the end of the day, that's not in my control. Where I just find it very interesting is just like, how come we're not promoting this same kind of hate and this same kind of effort to stop our teenagers from rubbing one out?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or why are we not calling out friends? Like, are we all waiting till marriage to have sex?
Right.
And if you hadn't before, then aren't you tainted already? Like, aren't you
Mm-hmm.
fucked? Like, you're already fucked up. I
Mm-hmm.
saw something like that recently too, where it was like this loving thing that these parents, I can't remember what it was exactly, but basically two parents were having a conversation with their child, and it was from a very loving place. And this guy basically responded, and this is my me being honest and being petty too, where like I just wanted to bring violence to the table too, because it is triggering for me. Like I just want us all to fucking get along. And he
God damn
basically,
it.
yeah, dude, he wrote this thing and was just like what the fuck happened to days when, like, the problem with society is that everyone is pushed away from God,
Mm.
when it was just a man and a woman and everything was great. And so then, like, I just click the profile for half a second and I see my guy's like single parent, right? And so then again, then it was like, damn, like he's not wrong in feeling like, God brings good value, because I've fucked around with the sculptures. I was with the sculptures, with the scriptures, right? And I was also brought up in a Catholic home. So it's like I get what you're saying. Like some of the things that it says, when you look at it subjectively, it makes sense, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, cool. If this helps you be a good individual, I get that. So I'm not saying you're wrong on that, but it's like you're not really trying to make this about Christianity, dog, because
Mm-hmm.
like you're over here promoting being a single dad and like doing your own thing. Like I'm pretty sure that same God would be very disappointed in you right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why
Yeah.
did you leave your marriage? Because if you hadn't shied away from God, according to God, you fix your shit with your family.
Mm-hmm.
You fucking
Yeah.
tied the knot. You were with them. You're in, bitch. Figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's not that I want to be right. It's just like, bro, just come over to us and tell us, hey, you know what? This shit just makes me uncomfortable because I think I might have some homophobic ways in which I was brought up. Dog, I respect that. Me
Mm-hmm.
too. Me
Yeah.
too. I was told that this is how we were supposed to think. And I'm starting to realize like this shit ain't true. Honestly, we've been lied to.
Mm-hmm.
We've been
Yeah.
lied to about what this is all about. Um, and I think that's what sometimes it just calls for a very interesting conversation of like, what are we really saying? Right? Like we said
Right.
at the beginning, like what are we actually saying? And at what point do we stop and acknowledge like, yo, we're trying to continue to justify and to keep deflecting. I mean, I see people post some stuff that's like very hateful, whether it's about masculinity, whether it's about women, whether it's about the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like dudes that are in the military or people that aren't, whatever it is that it might be. And I see it and I'm just thinking like, where do you guys find this stuff?
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm like, there's a lot of this information that you're receiving or that we are looking at is like, how much of it are we throwing in front of our faces, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, some of these algorithms are fucking weird. I don't see a lot of this information. Like I can go and find it, and I have when I've needed to. But outside of that, I don't see a lot of this hateful information.
Yeah. No, yeah.
And I wonder how much of that influences the choices. And not only that, but I wonder how much of that really is as true as we think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also want to take a moment, like, you know, I think to validate some of those feelings I think people have
Hmm.
when they're,
Absolutely.
when they're seeing maybe love in ways that they didn't grow up seeing, and maybe in ways that they don't think is right for whatever reason, right? And like, I feel like, there's been so many times that I've seen posts on social media, and um it makes me feel weird. It makes me feel kind of like, I don't know, man, like I'm just gonna scroll past it. So the post I'm talking about the other day, my sister, she posted this. It was a post with like these two straight up Latino cholo looking dudes, right? And they were taking like pictures with one another. They
Oh,
were being
yeah.
they're being real cutesy and like, like gay couple. And bro, for one reason or another, like, I felt like kind of weird, dude. I was like, I don't know. And that's not to say what I was feeling is right, but like I just at least feel happy that like whether I scroll past it, watch it, whatever the case might be, and I feel the way I feel, I'm not like going into the comments and shitting on other people about it. Because guess what? That's on me. Those are things that are inside of me that for one reason or another, I haven't like come to grips, right? To with like, or maybe I just haven't been exposed to it enough, to the point that I'm okay. Like, because I think in one part, like I thought what was weird for me when I was watching it, I'm like, dude, these are supposed to be tough motherfuckers. And just
They're
by
all G'd
virtue,
out too, right?
yeah, all
I
G'd
think I know what
out.
you're talking about. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
then so
Tatted and everything, bro.
but now I'm seeing this love and I'm just like, I think I was discrediting like maybe they are still fucking cholos, right? Maybe they'll still take my ass
Maybe they'll
out.
still.
Like
I was
I
about to
don't
say,
know.
bro. As far as you
Like
know, they'll still fuck you up,
yeah,
dude.
still fuck me up, bro. Like and so once again, all that toxic masculinity, like you know, I mean, I feel like we're the face of this. I mean, you're really the face. I'm here to support, being the face of this two guys who, I think sometimes like, being real cynical. Oh, these motherfuckers just think they know it all.
Mm,
We don't.
fuck
I
no.
fucking don't,
Fuck
bro.
no.
I still feel so many of the same feelings I think the next guy may have watching something that they're just not used to. Maybe make someone maybe it was the PDA. I don't know, right? There's a complexity to how
Yeah,
it made me
yeah,
feel, but I feel like I had the self-awareness, the self-regulation, the emotional intelligence to just know it's something about you and nothing about what's happening because I'm still being socialized to these things, right?
yeah, yeah,
And nothing they're doing is hurting anyone, because if
yeah.
it was some dude and some girl, like a cholo guy with his cholo girl taking pictures next to their lowrider being cute, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I probably still would have swiped past it because I
And to
kind of
be
don't
honest
give a
with you, it
fuck.
probably
Like,
wouldn't have got that much publicity. I think
exactly.
that's why it's such a big thing because just like in a way, right? We've joked about this, but like we don't fit that mold. They don't fit that mold either. And you know what was
Right.
crazy is like I almost felt in this moment like, damn, bro, as a straight man who's like a fucking machista over here, I get afraid to speak up about certain shit sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
And
and
that,
here are
yeah.
these two brave
Yeah.
motherfuckers that said, fuck y'all. We're going against, maybe not even fuck. Well, I mean, in a way they did, right? And said,
Yeah.
like, we're just going to do our thing. And I'm like, damn, they probably didn't even do that thinking about any of us. But like,
Hmm.
I have so much respect for that because
Yeah.
I don't have those odds stacked against me. And I'm fucking scared. And like you said, what is that really saying?
Yeah.
What is that really saying? And I think the most important part of what you just said, bro, which is we can't deny ourselves of those discomforts and those feelings. And
Most
I
definitely.
think if we don't practice feeling those things, we're never going to get better. And more importantly, we're never going to be able to disconnect that from making sound and very healthy and loving decisions for ourselves and for our villages moving forward. Because
Hmm.
again, it's not that one is right or wrong. It's what kind of things are we bringing into the table when we're thinking about these conversations and when we're thinking
Right.
about creating this change.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. And it's not like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's uncomfortable, right? And
Hmm.
who likes being no one likes being uncomfortable. We get it. And like the more you don't allow yourself to be uncomfortable, I think, the more you'll be stagnant, I think, in your perspectives on life, which, and I think for a lot of people it's worked for them. It's like, well, why do I need to grow my perspective on life? I'm fucking fine. Like, I just feel once again that who knows, man. Life throws you curveballs sometimes, and I think that's why I also appreciate La Misión. It's such a good
Yeah.
movie because once again, it was like I think from his perspective, whoa, life threw me a curveball and I had to adapt. But like, what if I told you that could have maybe never been a curveball if you were just socialized a little bit more to
And
a
this is
gay
yeah,
experience,
dude,
like.
and this is where I think, like, the beauty I saw within that whole thing too was the circle that he had around him, everything from the neighbor, right, the woman, to even his boys, because I think had it not been for them, it wouldn't allowed him to go through him feeling what him feeling what he needed to feel, but also being challenged. Because I think had they all been on the same boat as him, we keep this going.
Yeah.
Right? We
Mm-hmm.
just keep this going, and sometimes, honestly, I feel like that's kinda similar to what we're doing, where it's like, we get it, we're not trying to, like, tell you, like, "Wow, you fucking feel weird when 2 dudes kiss?" Like, "Oh, you're part of the problem." Like, "Nah, bro, we get that." And what is that, what are we saying, you know? Just like, I think I've mentioned this before, but, like, guys that now wear bags,
Mm.
right? And I thought about that, and I'm like, now being in a place where I had a conversation with the dude about this, and he's like, "Oh, dad won't do that shit, bro. Like that shit's gay."
Mm.
I can see why you think that. Like, is it really gay? Well, yeah, bro. Like that's just suspicious. Like guys shouldn't be doing da da da. And I'm like, let me ask you something. Do you know what you like, right? Yeah. Okay. If I was to put a bag around your shoulders, like, would you want a dick around your mouth? Oh, dog, why would you even say no, no, exactly, bro. Like,
Yeah.
that's my point. That's my point, is I
Mm-hmm.
think the discomfort you're feeling is so valid, and I don't wanna take that away from you, but I also don't want you to sell yourself short of
Right.
acknowledging what we're saying, because I know that you don't feel that way. I know that you
Yeah.
love what you love, and you're gonna stick to that because that's how you feel.
Yeah.
So, where did that come from, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I said this, I think that we didn't choose to have these perspectives kind of thrown on us and to have these
Mm-hmm.
beliefs, whether you know how it is in Raza too, bro. Like we fuck with each other a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's like I didn't choose that. I didn't choose my dad to say joto every other sentence that he said,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so but I also now can acknowledge that, dude, it's up to me if I decide to believe those things or not, right? And that can
Right.
go beyond LGBTQ community and my beliefs and wanting to be loving towards other, but even masculinity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're obviously challenging that consistently because we fell into it, right? And we
Yeah.
wanted to be a part of it because we thought we had to, and now we learned that. Whoa, I was just thinking about the fact that I was so afraid to speak up about the shit that I was doing as a man because I'm like, there's so much shame tied to this. People are just gonna cancel me. And
Mm.
I feel I wanna take a second to just say thank you to our community, to everyone that always reaches out when we post stuff, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't help but think like, dude, there are so many women out there that, like, show so much love to us and support us. And I remember at the very beginning was I was very, very, like, adamant about, like, "Nope, we can't let women in." And not because I didn't want them in, but because I was scared that I was like, "I'm not ready for them to start pointing fingers at me. I'm not
Mm.
ready for them to start canceling us. I'm not ready for them to start giving a shit, and it's gonna be hard to speak up." And I realized I was like, "Bro, they were there to support the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to talk about these things. They want us to get a better understanding for ourselves." Like, they really are here to show us love, and there's so many people that are showing us support, even though it doesn't feel like it. And why does it not feel like it? I think is a
Yeah.
real question that we should be asking ourselves too, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%, dude. I mean, and I think a part of it is like, sometimes there is the fear of like, oh my God, I'm gonna get canceled, or
Mhm.
and I think that fear isn't even a bad thing sometimes. Like, even with me, I think sometimes I'm afraid that like, I feel oftentimes like I think when we're up here, I feel like we're coming up to bat for a lot of folks, right?
I agree.
Um, and the fear for me comes in that like someone may criticize me like, damn, you didn't bat hard enough for me,
You
or
let you
damn,
let them down?
yes, I think that's
Yeah.
my biggest fear when it comes to this, and I think a lot of it comes from that space of like, it's because I know I don't know it all. It's because I know that even though I am self, and I know that like there's still so much privilege that I hold on to, that I haven't done the most, and so, and I think sometimes that fear has robbed me from the opportunity of like going up to bat, like, especially when it comes to this conversation of Pride Month, allyship is the
Yeah, yeah,
word
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
comes, and there's so many times that I've even heard people shit on the term of allyship, because it's like, the privilege of being an ally is that one day you can be, the next day you can't, right? Or like,
Mm.
depending on the space, right? And all that is so true, yet nonetheless, like, I just don't want that fear to paralyze me,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then I think, you bring up a good point there, which is, like, I don't see myself as being at the forefront of this fight for the LGBTQ community, right? Like, not because not because it's not my fight or anything, but it's like it's just I
We're on
feel
other
that
fronts,
this
I
is yeah,
feel.
bro, like it's a totally different thing for us. However, I think in doing the work with what we're doing for masculinity, it translates so much into what the community is trying to what they're trying to do. And I
Mhm.
think that's where it's like, yo, this is part of our fucking problem here. Right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna stand up and be like, yo, I'm gonna go to the march and I'm gonna be at the like I'm the face of it now all of a
Mhm.
sudden because we have to do this, right? Like, what kind of fucking privilege do I think I have? However, I can acknowledge the fact, and it's funny because I remember thinking about this like even a couple years back and thinking like, well, I'm not in it, so like why
Right.
like I should just get out of the fucking way type of thing, you know? Which I still kind of feel like to a certain extent because I think some of us would actually be helping out a lot if even if we just did nothing, right? Instead of adding fuel to the fire to make it worse, by simply doing nothing, sometimes that does a lot. And I've
Yeah.
had to learn that too. I've had to learn that too, where it's like I don't always have to be at the forefront. I don't always have to do something. Sometimes taking a step back and simply supporting and allowing people to express themselves and not being like in the way of some of this stuff does a lot. Does a
Yeah.
lot to show love without me feeling like I have to overextend myself and save everyone. And when I do feel that, where does that come from? It's like, well, that's comes from you thinking you need to always fucking fix everything. That you
Yep.
need to be the man that provides. That doesn't come from, somebody from a certain community or from a certain message that they're trying to deliver comes to you and says, "Sant, Carlos, we need you guys to deliver this. We need you guys to do 20 episodes on this." And then, because at that point, I would be like, what the fuck? Why do we have to do this?
Mm.
No one's
Yeah.
asked that out of us.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah.
And so I think it's just acknowledging the fact that just like it translates into how much we need to be manly men for our villages and tying it even into the men's health this month, right? Which is another one. And so it's physical and emotional, right? I think
Mm.
physical, we're good because that's a manly thing. That's a conversation that's like normal, but then we don't
Mhm.
tie the emotional aspect to it, right? But how the homophobia can relate not only to the emotional, and then it kind of spreads into these other areas of our communities too that we go, yo, this is not good for
Yeah.
ourselves and for everybody else around us. And I think now as a father, I really start to see that it's like, whoa, just saying, "Hey, like, I'm not really racist, but, like, nah, that's not enough." Instead, I'm
Yeah.
gonna say, "Hey, you know what? I grew up seeing some racist shit," or, like, my dad would say some racist shit all the time, so I have these racist beliefs that I don't wanna hold on to anymore because they don't align with what I think, and, this isn't we're not gonna talk racism here. That's a whole 'nother conversation that Kassan and I will be having because
Mhm.
it is something that same thing, same
Yeah.
exact thing, right?
Yeah, and I think you can actually have a conversation off of that
Mhm.
feeling, right? And a conversation that's really gonna like dive deep into like what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Because once again, like me saying I'm homophobic versus me saying, oh no, well it's just that I'm religious.
It's just God won't let me, bro.
Just
It's just that I wanna
yeah,
protect my kids, and I
yeah,
know we're just it sounds like we're talking shit
yeah.
now, but no, like, but we I mean, I get it. I'm telling y'all, like, I
Or
get it.
or fine, or like I think even taking the step of saying maybe you're uncomfortable saying that I'm a homophobic, just like the simple fact, like you know what, I didn't grow around like being exposed to a lot of this as a child, right? I whenever I was exposed to it, there was a negative connotation. I have heard stories of friends who are in the LGBTQ community, and they have really traumatizing experiences. And like you said, Carlos, I would not want my community
Yeah.
to feel that hate, right? So what's the easiest way? Then I don't want them to be part of that community, right?
Well, here's the other thing that I wonder too is hypothetical, like, what if we celebrated, you know, like same-sex marriages? Like, I wonder what would
Mhm,
be the how we would look at it now to our children of like, "Oh, man, I hope my boy loves another boy, man." Like, I really
mhm,
hope they
mhm,
like, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if we would and if not, then again, then we question like, "All right, where this shit coming from?" And I
mhm.
think more so to get involved.
Yeah.
To get involved. Like, yo, I agree, man. Like, if this stuff's happening, I actually just had a conversation with Julian the other day about one of the kids that was on our team who had a speech impairment, and
Mm,
mom was telling me how there was a little bit of like ADHD and stuff like that, and so very age appropriate. But I had to have a conversation with Julian. And I was just like, hey, Papa, because the thing is that Julian was getting a little frustrated with him,
mm,
and so it was one of those where I'm like, and dude, so was I. right? Like, so was I, because it's like, Santi, hey, hey, stop,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm like, I get it. And I could sense Julian like having these moments of just like, Santi. Like,
Mm.
and
Like, come
so,
on, bro.
yeah, dude. So that
Yeah.
day after breakfast, I was just like, hey, man, like, by the way, I just want to give you a heads up. My guy, and obviously I'm using your name, but I'm like, my guy Sant, like, basically, the way that his brain works is a little differently than ours, and so his is very, very excited, and
Mhm.
just like ours gets excited, his gets excited too, and so sometimes he's thinking about one thing and he's thinking about another, and I'm sure you see me sometimes trying to talk to him, and he kind of goes in a lot of directions, and so I understand that it's frustrating. I don't want to discredit your frustration. I
Mhm.
just want you to keep in mind that his brain runs a little faster than yours, and it was one of those where I'm like, I want to give him clarity. Let him think about it. Let him figure
Yeah.
out. I mean, of course, I want him to start having empathy, but I'm like, let him figure that out. I'm not gonna say you need to be nice. No, you figure it out. And then
Mhm.
at the soccer pizza party at the end, so the boy, like, he follows Julian a lot, right? And so he ends up getting like his little toys when he turns in his tickets, and he told Julian, "Hey, pick something out." And so Julian, like
Nice.
and I was just like, "Damn, like, that's so sick, dude, like, kids are so
Mhm.
fucking dope, right?" So, interesting, so then Julian goes, he gets his stuff, and he gets, like, a big thing with the majority of his tickets, and then he starts looking at all the little shit. It was at Shakey's, so you know how they get, like, que un
Little
pinche
stamps and shit.
yeah, like, just the little shit to just make up for
Mhm.
whatever's left, right?
Yeah.
So, he starts getting all these little things, and they were like, I wanted to tell him, like, "Hey, bro, like, you better fucking share, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you better get him something." Like, I'm like, I
Yeah.
want to teach my kid to share, to fucking be nice and shit. So I wanted to jump in, but I was just watching. I was just watching.
Mm.
The motherfucker wasn't saying anything, and I'm
Uh-huh.
watching and I'm watching. And then out of nowhere, he's just like, "Hey, Sant," and he wasn't paying attention. He's like, "Come here." He's like, "Pick whatever you want." And like, dude, my heart was just like, fuck. Like, he made that fucking choice all on his own. And
Mhm.
he was just yelling at this kid a week ago because he wasn't listening. Does that take away from his frustration? No, because I'll never do that to my child. I will never take away whatever the fuck he's feeling.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that I'm able to help him to
Mhm.
start to understand that, hey, we kind of have to disconnect that a little bit when it comes to showing up. But I also know that a big part, and this is where I give a lot of credit to his mom, and I have to give myself a little bit of flowers, is that he is able to have that level of empathy because he has a space where he's being heard.
Right.
And really, to wrap this whole thing up, is how many of us feel heard?
Mhm.
How many of
Mhm.
us feel understood? How many of us feel loved for who we are as individuals? And how that can translate into how we go into conversations that really force us to be open-minded with people that think and see things differently than us, you
Yeah.
know?
No, yeah, 100%. And like tying that last point that you just made, oftentimes, I think you say like, especially from Latino communities, you probably don't feel safe because people are gonna be
Mhm.
fucking with you,
Yeah.
and it's like you're already projecting. Well, that's how it's. I'm gonna be picked on with my friends, and that's even beyond the LGBTQ thing, right? It could be anything, dude. It could even
Yeah.
be like, there's been times, bro, that like I have like maybe like a health concern, and I literally don't even want to bring it up with my folks. It's like, man, they're just gonna they're gonna make me feel weak, or
Yeah.
they're gonna make me feel.
Mm.
And whenever I've shared any concerns, it's like, no, man, nothing but love and concern. And hey, let me know when you feel better, right? And it's just so it's interesting how our brains fill in gaps, and oftentimes they're filled in once again by certain traumas that we felt in our past,
Yeah. Yeah, and we touched about that in the assumptions and the 4
right?
agreements, right? And and
Hmm.
and even that, though, that I think is so valid because those assumptions come from somewhere,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
and it's an assumption nonetheless, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
still an assumption, and so I feel very, very, very lucky and fortunate, dude, that we can talk about these things. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate the fact that you've shared also, some of the struggles that you're going through with this and how we're trying to navigate them from a better place, right? While being able to validate ourselves. And I really hope that this helps other men too to see things differently, right? Because I'll tell you right now, I still have homies that see things from a different lens, and we see things from different perspectives, and we don't agree on everything.
Hmm.
But again, I think the more we peel back on this fucking layers, I think the more sound we come into the conversation. Because before I couldn't even listen to you if you didn't think like me,
Right.
straight up. And I think this is just another added layer that's like, let's give it a little bit of love. and let's get it out so that when we go back into this and we go, hey, we're really scared of our kids, we go, you know what? We're all on the same page. There is nothing to be afraid about here. It's just
Hmm.
awareness. We're just
Yeah.
trying to figure some shit out and try to normalize things that are already happened. And that if one of our kids decides to be like, hey, I'm starting to question shit, we have information for them. I read something somewhere that was like, we've had nothing but straight resources, and somehow children turn out to be gay still.
Yeah.
Obviously, that didn't
True.
work, right? So to
Yeah.
me, it's like, yo, all it is now if there's that one child that maybe starts to question things or sees differently, maybe we can provide him with a fucking book now where he goes, oh shit, I don't have to
Like this.
navigate this by myself. And maybe
Right.
now mom and
One
dad are
hundred
more willing
percent.
to be like, yo, I got you, bro. Let's talk about
Yeah.
this shit. And as a
Yeah.
community, when one of our boys comes through and says, hey, my kid's questioning shit, we don't have to pick on that motherfucker and just be like, hey, bro, bring him around. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna take all of us, dude.
Yeah, dude. Real quick, I know we're going past time, but like
Give
that
a fuck.
totally even fucking reminds me, like, you know, well, a few things. I can't tell you how many friends, gay friends I have who have actually told me I knew I was gay since that I can remember. Like I have one buddy specifically. He was my roommate for a summer. Um, Fucking coolest dude ever. But point being, I like he would constantly talk about that. Like, oh no, I knew I was gay since like early elementary school. And right now you saying that, like, maybe there's that one kid who just already knows, right? And I think that's who I think about. Like, I think about people like my boy, who honestly, like, I'm sure he's not the only
Yeah.
one. He's not this
Bothering anyone.
anomaly. Yeah, I mean, but he, like, you know, unfortunately did not have like maybe certain literatures that he could cling on to and be like, wow, this is normal. I'm not like Ekis, right? He, like, less things that like that he would have to, I guess, figure out on his own. Because man,
Yeah.
I can't imagine how lonely that might be, bro. um because I mean, even for me, dude, when I was a kid, like, I remember the oversharing. When I was like in second grade, bro, I literally remember like having sexual fantasies about my teacher, female chick. And you know what I would think about? Titanic. Because I watched Titanic when I was a
Mm.
kid, bro. That's the first time I seen what I seen. You know what I
And
mean?
you know
Like,
what's crazy is if we tried to cancel Titanic, they'd be
oh,
like, "That's fucking stupid." Like,
yeah.
what? What? What?
Right. Granted, it's a PG-13 movie, and I saw it
Sure.
very, very young. But yeah, like, no one batted an eye, right? I think like when she's like comes out naked and stuff, I'm sure I remember doing like one of these
Hey.
things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like I also don't remember it being a big deal. But because I was exposed to this movie, I started equating it to like having these fantasies about my teeth, which I didn't know there were sexual fantasies, bro. I literally would just remember her wearing that little robe, like my teacher wearing the robe and her taking it off and me painting her and shit.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like, no one gave me anything. That was my own brain, bro.
Right,
Like, you know.
right, right.
And anyways, all that being said, I also feel like if I would have shared that, I would have had the privilege of not feeling like
Yeah. I mean,
not being guilted, right?
and I think, I relate it even to like spanking where it's like, oh, but we turned out okay, right? Like a child not having those resources. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, we did the best of what we could. The thing is, just like I've been learning as a parent, that there are better ways to parent. It's like, yo, where there's more resources, we can make these things more accessible. I mean, we're essentially trying to just stop people from living their lives, right? And that's
Yeah.
a big part of it. And so again, I think making that disconnect of like, oh, this is about sexual. Why are they pushing their agenda? Like even the argument of like, why are they pushing this? Like they're throwing this stuff in our faces, and I'm like, you go to Barnes and Nobles and there's a section of like fucking Magic School Bus section. It's like, ugh, I hate when they push this stuff. Nobody's pushing shit onto you. Like if you
Yeah.
feel a certain way about how you feel, that's okay. But if you like the Magic School Bus, guess what? You can find those books there now. They're accessible. And so
Mhm.
and I get it. Not to shit on this fear of what's being thrown, but it's like I don't think anyone's trying to get brainwashed here, you know?
Mhm.
And I think if it's feeling like it's brainwashing, it's like maybe we already felt that way and we just didn't address it.
Yeah.
Something that I real quick, just like to end it. One of the things that happened in La Misión, and I don't know if you remember, spoiler alert, when Homeboy gets shot and he says something about him, the dude calls him like
Mm.
about being gay, and the white dude was like, they say that those that are what did he say? He's like, those that are gay are those that have the most homophobic comments or
Mhm.
something like
Mhm.
that to say. The white
Mhm.
kid said that.
Mhm.
And then he was like, what? And so what was interesting to me about that was that I was like, damn, he was right.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
also there was other part of me that was like, who does this fucking privileged little fucking white kid
Yeah.
think he is showing up
Right.
here and like trying to fucking educate and shit, bitch? Like, get
Yeah.
the fuck out of here, right? Like there was this like two-sided.
Weird.
With
Yeah.
that being said, just like our boys that decided to express their love to each other
Mhm.
openly, I'm
Mhm.
like, that's why this shit's so powerful because it needs to be our own, not because the white boy had bad intentions, not
Right.
because what he said was wrong, because he was
Mhm.
right. But
Mhm.
a lot of times, just like with the homophobia, I think a lot of times, and I've done this, where it's like, oh, but you don't get it. It's like, nah. But the reality is nobody knows my story. Nobody has my story, and I will continue to not get it to continue to justify everything that I want to believe,
Mhm.
right? And so I think the closer it gets to home, oh, therapy's not a thing, all right? Well, it's because I'm in the construction industry. Oh, so am I. No, but it's because I used to do coke. So did I. No, but
Mhm.
like I drink all the time. Still do. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, so it's like you start eliminating all these
Yeah.
things where, and I think culture is such a huge one that we usually like have our most loyalty to, right? As Raza, our loyalty is to our culture. And so that's our wall. Nah, but it's
Mhm.
because you're white. No, it's because you're this old. It's because back in my
Yeah.
day, it was like you're putting up more walls instead of just acknowledging, hey, this is what it is. And it's scary, bro.
Yeah.
It's fucking
Hella.
scary to do it. So with that, I do want to give a shout out to the dudes that are doing it, that are just willing, that are just like, yo, maybe I don't even know what the fuck I want, where I'm headed with this, but I know that some of this shit don't make no sense. If you've been here this long, listening and share your thoughts with us. Like, what do y'all think? You know what I mean? Like, what can we do to help you guys see things maybe a little differently?
Yeah.
And I don't even want to say to see things right, because I don't know what the fuck right is, but from a better light, from a healthier light. um,
Mhm.
and yeah, man, this shit ain't
Yeah.
easy. Definitely always give flowers to all the men and women out there that are putting in that work, man, that are helping each other out and that are really encouraging their communities to step up, man, to break these cycles.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I want to pose that same challenge to everyone is like be willing to see other perspectives. I think oftentimes having perspective is what gives you the tools to be better in general. I think about the story you gave about Julian,
Mm,
with his soccer friend. What you really did is you gave him the tool of perspective for him to make a more informed choice as to how he wants to treat his friend, you
yeah,
know
which
and
sucks.
he chose not to be frustrated because he knew better. He maybe he understood. I mean, and that's not to say he'll never be frustrated with this.
Sure, sure,
Maybe,
sure. I get
but
frustrated
maybe
with you, bro.
exactly. But maybe the threshold of it, you allowed it to expand naturally because you just gave him more information, right?
Right. Yeah, for
And,
sure.
and I
And
think that is so fucking powerful.
yeah, and real quick, because I meant to bring this up earlier, but just real quick, because I do want to, I know statistics, and we like to get like, okay, let's not make this about feelings. Let's talk about what it is. And I think Texas has the highest number of pedophiles.
Mm,
Um, and California comes in second with, I had it up here. I want to say it's like 6,600.
mm,
And I know that I think it's anywhere from 60 to 70% of pedophiles are men.
mm,
So again, I'm not with that shit. But if this is about protecting our kids, like we got some more dangerous straight folks out there too that are out to get our kids. That
yeah,
if that's what this is really about, like let's promote it for what it is, and not shitting on the fact that we're wrong about that, but let's question what this whole thing is. And if we're wrong and it turns out this whole time you really are about protecting the kids and shit, yo, I want to hear from you.
yeah,
Right? I want to hear from you because not only do I want to support your message as well, but I would love your help with making sure that we're bringing clarity to the table with the conversations that we're having,
yeah,
right? So that I know that when I'm going into space and someone's really about like, yo, I have love for everyone. I'm here to fucking protect my kids. All right, cool. Let's separate the two. How do we fucking do this? How do we help you? How do we keep having this conversation so that we don't get this mixed up?
Mm-hmm.
Keep it clear as mud. You know what I mean?
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud.
Fuck, dude. My
And with
supervisor
that,
always says that.
yeah, I'd say that's all the time at work.
With
With
that.
that, I'm done.
TBD.
Yeah, I didn't get to. Oh man, the Nurturing Fathers program has been amazing. For the
I
sake
know.
of confidentiality, I don't really want to share anything from the group itself, but I will share a little bit about my experience, which is just that it's been incredible, man. It's been awesome. I just feel honored to be in that space with these guys, and to learn together, which I think is going to be amazing. It's going to be incredible. So um, once again, I give a shout out to everyone that has supported that has shown love, that has spread the word. Um, and even some of y'all, if y'all popped up in there, man, I got love for y'all. We have the wellness workshop coming up on June 17th, which will be in Orange, California. We're going to do some Reiki, some breath work, shit that I've never really done before. You've never really done before, but we're going to try it out. I think right now we filled up 15 spots.
Sick.
I think I believe there's 5 more. So if you are interested, if you want to link up, shoot us a DM. We'll get you involved. As you guys know, episodes go out on Wednesdays. Um, I think that's all we have really going on right now. I don't know if you have anything going on that you want to share. I don't know
Daryl,
if you want to
I have
promote
a lot of shit going on,
some
and
stuff that you've got going on that you do with somebody else.
we'll talk about that later.
Fair. All right. Well, then we'll leave it there. You guys take care. Have a great week, and we'll catch up with you guys soon. We appreciate you guys listening.
Have a good night, everyone. Peace.